Hi, everyone. My name is Rav. I'm from Region 3. I grow South Asian vegetables just outside of Toronto. Very excited to be part of this first panel, which is, I think, a great panel to kick off this convention, which is about NFU in action, but specifically in policy action. We have really amazing staff who are working with farmer leaders and other members, researching and analyzing different topics, problems, and opportunities that affect farmers. And as we know, there are many of those. But we rightly focus more on things that we care about, things that we have a lot of knowledge about, perhaps. So things like our own farming practices, issues in our region, maybe, or something that will really affect our livelihood or communities. And a really key element of that is having policy staff that are able to research and analyze to help us better understand what we're dealing with and what the opportunities are, and to help really focus the attention on policy issues and share whatever they find with us, because it can be really difficult to see the bigger picture and how the dots all connect when we're out in the field doing our day-to-day farming activities, but also trying to connect into these really large policy topics. So I'm really hoping that this panel will provide some opportunities for us all to become more empowered through engagement in policy work, and highlight some policy areas that maybe you're not super familiar with. And we're going to do a little sharing towards the end too, because just as our policy staff are really important in this work, equally important is us, the members, engaging in this work, supporting the staff, because we are the ones on the ground, on the front lines doing not just policy work, but advocacy work in general. So I have some amazing staff and NFU people up here who are behind the scenes usually doing and supporting policy work. So I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some discussions. Darrin, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks, Rav. Darrin Qualman, I'm your Director of Climate Crisis Policy and Action based out of the National Office in Saskatoon.
I'm James Hannay, the policy analyst, not assistant anymore. I work out of London, Ontario, but I'm connected to the national office.
Hey everyone, I'm Dave Thompson. I am the Farm Labor and Special Projects Manager with the National Farmers Union Ontario, Region 3.
Hi, and I'm Cathy Holtslander. I'm the Director of Research and Policy, and I work in the national office in Saskatoon.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off the discussion by asking each of you what some of the top policy issues are that you anticipate the NFU will need to address in the coming year, and why these are important to the people in this room and the people joining us online. Darrin, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Rav. So it's been my great pleasure to work with this organization for just coming up on 3 decades. And so those of you in the room that are new, you have the great good fortune of stumbled into one of the greatest groups of deep thinkers and analysts and rigorous thinkers. It is really, really lovely to do policy work with the NFU and all of you. And I'm going to talk about a lot of things. Well, I'm not. I'm going to constrain myself to talking about 3 things initially, but all of those are real group efforts. So what we're hoping to do is inspire you to really get involved. Find an issue that you are really interested in and really get involved. So I do work on the climate side of the NFU policy, and my colleagues here do work on some of the other issues. So I'll just highlight 3 things that we're doing on the climate side, and it's 3 out of a long list. There's a handout on the front table, that little 2-pager that looks like this. It's called the NFU's Climate Work on Behalf of Farmers. So if you want to know more about the work we're doing on climate, please grab that 2-pager and have a look. I'll just highlight 3 things that we're doing on climate. So the first one is the CFRA, and we've heard a little bit about that, the Canadian Farm Resilience Agency, modeled on the PFRA that functioned for more than 7 decades, tremendously respected by farmers. It was born out of the climate impacts that hit farmers in the 1930s. And what we say is that the PFRA was the right answer for what happened in the 1930s. The CFRA is the right answer as we move into the 2030s. Extension agrologists, on-farm assistance from the federal government for everything from soil health to emissions reduction, also demonstration farms, etc. And key to this is a lot of the people in this room are really, really active in this work. A lot of the members in this room are meeting with MPs, meeting with their provincial governments across the country. They are meeting with other farm organizations. They are building awareness and support. And we are going to bring the CFRA idea to the federal government and hope to get it into budget 2025 in the spring. We've been working on this for 4 years in a very concerted way, building the idea, building awareness, and we're hoping to move it to the next level in budget 2025. So that's on one side. Here's another issue that we're working on, sustainable aviation fuel. The NFU is tremendously visionary and forward-looking, and as a result of the work in the Climate Committee, and I hope if you're not involved in that, you consider joining. As a result of the work in the Climate Committee, we became aware that the global airline and aviation industry plans to transfer, and this just sounds impossible, they plan to transfer the energy source for all of the aviation in the world from oil fields to farm fields. By 2050, they plan on getting most of the fuel for aviation from crops, corn, wheat, and soy, and from what they call agricultural residues, straw and corn stover, and purpose-grown energy crops, billions of tons per year. We released this report yesterday, and the NFU is probably the lead organization in all of Canada in terms of understanding what's happening with sustainable aviation fuel. So, and again, it's a product of a lot of minds working in the Climate Committee and elsewhere. Third one I'll mention, and then I'll hand it over. The NFU is leading in emissions reduction work. We understand that there's, farm profitability is key, sustainability on a lot of fronts are key, soil health, adaptation, and resilience. But a lot of other organizations are hesitant to really look at the emission reduction side. But we think as farmers, we need to do our part to help Canada meet its emission reduction targets, 40% by 2030. And so we've been really leading that work. We've been working with Farmers for Climate Solutions. We've been working through the Sustainable Ag Strategy. We've got a task force of experts at Farmers for Climate Solutions there. But the NFU is really leading that work in Canada now. And again, we're moving toward budget 2025, and we've got an ask in for $800 million per year to support farmers. And the NFU has really been key on a lot of this funding and policy work. A lot of the work that went into the program that became off-CAF, the NFU is at the table helping design that, and that's now flowing hundreds of millions of dollars per year to farmers for rotational grazing and enhanced efficiency fertilizer and cover crops. So those are 3 parts of a larger suite of work that we're doing, and I'm probably well over my time, so I better hand it off.
I think I'm on the opposite end of the experience spectrum from Darrin. I started the NFU just about 10 months ago, and it's been really amazing to learn from all of the members that I've had the chance to talk to in in-person conversations, or calling somebody in the middle of the day who I've never spoken to before to ask questions about the history of the NFU and their involvement in previous policy on all sorts of things, from railway to grain handling in the prairies in Saskatchewan, the co-op building movement, and all this other great stuff. So it's been a great pleasure, and I guess my top pieces of policy for you today are, one is the efficacy testing program. The NFU also recently released report on reinstating the efficacy testing program for non-fertilizer supplements in Canada. And this is a program that we had in Canada until 2013, I believe, when the government axed the program And we now live under a system of what we call farmer buy and try. You know, the claims on non-fertilizer supplements could say pretty much anything, and you wouldn't have to provide much verification for it. You wouldn't be required to provide any verification for it, actually. And so the NFU says that we should reinstate that program because it gives a good alternative to very expensive nitrogen fertilizer inputs, among other things. And it would be a very easy thing to do. We still have the knowledge in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to run that program. It would only take about $1 to $2 million per year for 8 experts to administer testing data every year, and I think it would be probably the most efficient thing to do to make sure that farmers aren't buying what one NFU member might have called bugs in a jug could just be bugs in a jug. You have no idea what that actually would do. So really important that we have a system that provides good scientific verification, doesn't rely on farmers to be the test subjects for these inputs. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is farmland issues, and I've had the great pleasure of working with the Farmland Committee at the NFU. It's a great committee. We have great conversations once a month about farmland issues on a broad variety of topics, and I'd like to quickly shout out the chairs, Catherine Ask and Caleb Wolcott, for doing a great job helping to run that committee. Farmland is an issue I think that we obviously all relate to. I mean, it's the basis for all of our work, but it's increasingly under threat from speculation and turning it into a financial asset. And so we're talking about the ramifications of what that means for ownership opportunities for young farmers, and what that means for our ability to access food and have a say in what our food system looks like. Because if you have hedge funds or pension funds buying up farmland, they're really there to extract profit first and foremost. And there's so much more to land than just taking from it. And that's something that we need to address. And so one of the things that we've been doing on that front of financial actors getting involved, or something we would like to do in the committee, is to start drawing connections between what's happening with farmland and what's happening in housing too, because you see the same thing happening in housing. They're really important, and I think it's really important for urban folks to understand what is happening outside of their cities is happening in their cities, and the same dynamics are playing out. And then finally, I'll quickly talk about right to repair. And right to repair is something that affects all of us as well. The ability for everybody to have timely and cost-effective access to repairs for the farm equipment you own, the appliances that you use, and being able to have autonomy over how you use your equipment. I think John Deere and many other farm machinery companies are putting digital locks on their system. So if you're using their equipment in ways that they don't agree with, they can completely shut you out of the system. They can also charge you exorbitant prices for repairs and not provide any explanation for why they need to access that. And then you get into issues of data collected from these systems. Do farmers really own that data? What is that data being used for? These are all really important questions, and something that the NFU is becoming a bit more active on through the North American Digital Agriculture Working Group, which is a collective of organizations across North America talking about the ramifications of digital technology in our food system and how that might affect not only farms but food system or food service workers as well.
Thanks, James. So yeah, I'm here on behalf of the NFU-O Region 3, and I guess if James just started, I'm more of a sophomore on this panel, having started with the NFU-O back right when COVID started in March of 2020. And I'm going to talk about some of the top policy issues in Region 3 right now, and I want to really say that I was so excited by the idea behind this panel, because I think one of the things the NFU-O and Region 3 is really working towards right now is trying to have our policy be a mobilization tool and a way for our members to become more engaged and active. And so having a discussion less about deep dives into policy and more about how we can all get involved and drive forward things that are going to be a benefit to us as farmers is really where we want to go. With that said, there's a few major issues that we're really trying to push forward in Region 3 over the next year, and most of them started this year and were driven by our members. So the first one I want to mention is Don Saparis, the former president, really wanted us to do some work around nutrient management on grain farms and others to deal with the algae blooms in Lake Erie. So we produced a report this year on nutrient management with the goal of trying to push forward a number of resolutions. So we engaged our members through very extensive phone interviews and arrived at a number of really key recommendations to push forward. And one of them is actually to try to follow the BC example, where there is now an agricultural code that helps regulate the use of synthetic fertilizers on cash crop operations. So we're working right now with the Ontario Grain Farmers Association and hopefully going to be able to push that forward. The second thing brought forward by one of our members through great discussions at the local level, who's 20-something. Oh, amazing. I can see more people now. Woohoo! You are out there. And so one of our 20-year-old members at a local came to us and said, look, I can't really start my chicken egg business at all because I can't afford to get into quota. But in Ontario, unfortunately, you can only have 100 chickens. Egg-laying chickens, and you can't sell your ungraded eggs anywhere but the farm gate. So we are working with a bunch of different folks. We had 40 members show up in late June, which is an amazing thing to have happen, where they really wanted to push forward this. So we're working together with a bunch of key members to bring that to the provincial legislature to have that changed. And then the other two pieces dovetail with what James said. We have a very active farmland access team right now, and we are about to produce an alternative land access guide that's an update from the one that we put out about 10 years ago. And we are doing kitchen table meetings and trying to engage our members around farmland access issues and the problems with affordability of land. And last but really not least, and very much driven by our membership, is the multiple different areas where we are pushing for farmland protection. As you probably are aware, the Ford government has been trying to carve up the green belt, and there have been all kinds of threats to farmland. And we have great members here in the audience today. In fact, Linda, who you heard from the Women's Caucus, has helped been leading the charge as President Jen Fenning around Wilmot Township and land expropriation there. We have members who are involved in Kemptville, where the government is trying to build a new prison on a former agricultural college land. So they're trying to protect that. And I'm very excited that within the next week or so, we're going to be releasing a new interactive web page on the NFUO website that will have a list and map showing all of these land where it's under threat and where there are various different activist groups and coalitions, including the NFUO, who are working to try to fight this, with links so that people can respond. And there'll also be an interactive page where if anyone knows of other farmland threats, they can share that with us and we can start compiling and gathering this. And we're hoping to hold meetings through the winter where we bring a group that is pushing forward, say, the Wilmot Township land, so that they can share their strategies for success with other groups so we can start building capacity to fight the loss of farmland in the province.
Thanks. So I guess everybody's starting with their experience. I began with the NFU in 2011, actually took over a little bit from Darrin's previous tenure. There was a little bit of a gap, and I jumped in and became the Director of Research and Policy back then. Also like to mention that my partner Lyle and I also farm. We have a certified organic grain farm in the Forest Fringe area. So I think being involved with the farming is a really good grounding for me in terms of the relevance of the policy work we do and how deeply it affects us as farmers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we can expect in the future, in the coming year or so, on a few of the big policy areas. People talked in the earlier this morning about this work we've done on seed issues, the seed regulatory modernization process, and plant breeders' rights regulations. This work isn't done yet. In fact, this kind of work is never done, because those big corporations and powerful actors that want to control seed and thereby the food system they'll never give up. So we can't give up either. We may see a set of regulatory changes, amendments to the regulations of the Seeds Act, this in the next year or so as a outcome of the seed regulatory modernization process. And what we hope is that all of the work that we've done so far will mean these are just small tweaks that will actually make it work a little bit better for farmers. But we have a big corporate body called Seeds Canada that is basically trying to do an end run around the process, because they don't like the kinds of things that the CFIA is hearing from actual farmers, and we'll attempt to get control of the seed somehow. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on that and be ready to act and push back. Whenever there's whenever there's a regulatory amendment that goes through the parliamentary system, there is a compulsory public consultation period. So we will have the opportunity to engage when that happens, and we'll do similar things, helping analyze the implications and help members and others to be effective when intervening. And there's a similar story with the plant breeders' rights regulations. Back when UPOV 91 was brought in, that really increased the corporation's ability to control seed. One of the things that what actually we were able to get was a farmer's privilege. We didn't like changing them from a right to a privilege to save seed, but that exists in our legislation, but it can be taken away by regulation. And this Plant Breeders' Rights Office has started moving that way. They think that, I believe that their idea is that hardly anybody who's a commercial farmer saves and reuses their seed for horticultural production. But even if it's a small number of people that do that, they want to do that, and they should have the right to do that. And if that is allowed to proceed, then of course they can chip away at further at our right to use farm-saved seed. So if there's if that process proceeds to the regulatory amendment stage, we will definitely be there to push back. And then a seed area that we haven't mentioned so far today is GMO wheat. In Argentina, the first commercial GM wheat has been approved for production there. It is not approved for Canada, and we want to keep it that way. We're keeping a very close eye on that with our allies in CBAN, who have a lot of expertise, and also NFU is a member of CBAN, so we participate in that. And gene-edited crops are something that we are also very concerned about and watching. There's been a lot of industry PR that makes it sound like it's just wonderful and it's all good and no problems. But one of the key elements of the gene-edited wheat is that it will be gene-edited crops will be patented, which means no seed saving, and also the imposition of certain kinds of production on farmers. So the gene-edited issue is a big one that we'll need to continue raising awareness about, particularly the corporate control aspect. Now, everybody knows that there's been a big election in the United States. There's a lot of implications that come out of those results. And this has implications for trade. This is an area that the NFU has been involved with for many, many years, looking at the trade agreements and how they affect farmers. And I guess trying to help people understand that trade agreements aren't really about trading goods between countries. This is about changing the rules and giving corporations more power over our economies. And they're really a restructuring process. So engaging in these trade agreement things sometimes feels like really boring, really dry, really complicated. But in some ways, it's dead simple. You know, the big companies want more control, and this is one of the ways they try and do it. In the CUSMA agreement, the Canada, U.S., Mexico trade agreement, the way when it came into being, they put in a clause that it would be renegotiated in 2026. So that's coming up pretty soon. And so what we're seeing is some positioning by Canada, United States, and Mexico. How are they going to handle this this new negotiation? And also some of the more corporate-dominated farm groups are going to be having their take on it and looking for how they can lobby for their interests. But I think a couple of things for us that are particularly relevant is supply management is definitely going to be in the crosshairs. It's definitely being seen as a bargaining chip, and that the United States wants access, particularly to dairy, but probably to chicken as well. And so that's something we'll have to continue fighting to protect. And we can also work with other organizations in the United States and Mexico who are in solidarity with us to protect farmers' rights against the agribusiness incursions. And so that's a really, it can be a very powerful process. People have mentioned the pastured poultry idea, which is a kind of making room for some maybe different ways of doing production, but within the supply management system, not separate from it. So it would be a way to strengthen our supply management system. And then another thing that is potentially going to be coming up is the federal government that we have had signaled that they want to bring in amendments to the Canada Grain Act, which is what governs the Canadian Grain Commission. The Canadian Grain Commission has a mandate to regulate the grain sector in the interests of producers. And this mandate is really, really important. It helps balance power between all of the individual farmers and the few big companies that we have to deal with when we're grain farmers. And there is concern that this mandate could be watered down, or there could be other changes that weaken the Canadian Grain Commission. So if and when legislation comes out regarding the Canadian Grain Commission, we will again need to be examine it closely and push back or support, depending on how we see the legislation. But Canadian Grain Commission is a very important institution that we need to keep strong in Canada and make sure it continues to work for farmers. So that's a little bit of what we're doing, but it's I think something we can be prepared for, and there'll be lots of ways to get involved.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, everyone. I was trying to write down all the different things that you were mentioning, and I almost filled my page. So as a reminder to us all, because these were amazing things, I hope I got everything. There was a lot about climate, the CFRA, sustainable aviation fuel, emissions reductions work, farmland access and protection, right to repair, nutrient management, egg quota, plant breeder rights, seed regulation, GM wheat, gene-edited crops, and trade agreements. That's a lot, and I really, really hope next year at convention we get an update on all of this, and they're all success stories. But a really key part to that being a success story is having members, farmer leaders, everyone in this room and beyond involved in this work in whatever capacity and way that they're able to. And just reading this, I'm a little overwhelmed. So I'm wondering if you all can share maybe some ideas you have of how we can get involved in these policy issues and what opportunities there are for us to support this really, really amazing work. Darrin, I'm sorry, I'm going to start with you again, if that's okay.
Thanks. Yeah, the NFU is doing a lot of things, and it can be a little overwhelming. But here's the thing: just start with one thing. Just pick an issue, something that you're really curious about, or interested in, or want to advance, or maybe infuriated about. There's lots of reasons to get involved, and lots of sources for our energy in this work. So pick one thing, get interested in it, because as many of you will know from your own lives, once you begin to take an interest in something, it becomes more interesting. The more you know, the more things kind of connect with that, and you connect the dots and you start to see deeper, and it really becomes interesting to work on these issues. So just start with one thing, and engage with the NFU there. Consider becoming a spokesperson, even, or a policy expert on that. And the NFU really is a great place to sort of grow and expand your knowledge of these things. And we've seen time and time again NFU members and officials who started looking into these issues over time become some of the Canadian experts in these issues, on seeds, on grain transportation, on the Canadian Grain Commission. So really just dig in and start working on one thing. Uh, I'm just going to say a little bit about how you can get involved with the climate work. The climate committee is really interesting, and it's a place where people can learn and exchange ideas and hash things out. Uh, a lot of new and emerging information there. So I urge you to join the climate committee. If you want to, you can come talk with me. The climate committee is meeting tomorrow morning for a little early morning, kind of informal get together, breakfast meeting at 7 a.m. upstairs. So if you're on the climate committee, please come to that breakfast get together. If you're climate committee curious and want to just know what we're doing, please come. If you've got an interest in climate issues, if you're seeing climate impacts on your farm, we'd welcome you to come in and maybe find a place in the NFU through the climate work. Thank you.
And there's a lot of ways to get involved with NFU work. I mean, there's certainly a spectrum of low involvement and high involvement, as Darrin mentioned at the top end. You'd be a spokesperson, but at the base, I mean, it's really important to add your voice to whatever conversations we're having. Replying to an email and a discussion thread, or simply attending NFU events online, filling out the surveys that we're providing guides for. Those are all really still impactful but fairly low effort things. And eventually you join committee and get involved in committee discussions every month. That's really great. Top end spokesperson, policy expert, the person I call at the end of the day when a reporter gets in touch wanting talk to somebody, and I say, hey, can you please speak to this reporter tomorrow? Which is really helpful, and a lot to ask. And I think it's important to say it. Any way you can get involved is really important, and no matter what that is and in what way, I think it's just important that we hear member voices, and our members are the ones directing our policy and our policy work.
Amazing. Thanks, James. Okay, so again, I'm coming from the Region 3 perspective, and my own background and experience too, I guess, as a union organizer, and how do we actually get people involved and mobilized through policy. And to me, the starting point is really around building a sense of community and trust, right? We just heard earlier today from our Women's Youth and BIPOC Caucus how a lot of the relationship building is how we build the trust where we can actually have the conversations about what we need for our farms to improve our livelihoods, to make sure that we push forward our sustainable agricultural desires and missions, right? And there are lots of different ways of doing that. And of course, committees are an important place for that. I was first really struck with one of the first committees I started to participate within the NFU nationally, which was the Migrant Workers Solidarity Working Group. And the way in which Jen and other chairs facilitated those meetings always starts with a check-in. right? It always starts with trying to figure out where people are at in their moment and day-to-day lives. So it wasn't actually delving into the policy issue right away. And it's important to carve out time and space for that. I know that the Indigenous Solidarity Working Group really works hard at that as well. And we try to implement that as well in our Region 3 Farmland Committee meetings and other events. I also think that regularly finding ways as members and as leaders and as staff to seek member input is a really important starting place for engagement. Okay, so we have, from our farm labor report to our nutrient management report, built in phone-based surveys. Especially during COVID, this was a clear way to develop connections with our members. So we called and we asked them and positioned them as experts. Instead of talking to them about, here's the policy we think you should follow and get involved in, we asked them, what do you think about the farm labor situation in Ontario? How do you think it could be improved to benefit both farm workers and your operation? And it was amazing the kind of response and level of engagement we got just through having that kind of dialogue and conversation, to the point that they would call us or send us emails regularly and saying, have you thought about this kind of policy change? Wouldn't this improve the situation for labor in the province? Right? So opening that kind of course of dialogue, I think, helps all members feel like their voice is heard and listened to, and that means that we can drive our policy forward. Okay, and when you're doing that, I recommend all members just do this too. Like, take the time to ask each other how your lives are, but then follow it up with, what do you think you can do to improve your farming experience? What policy changes would really make a difference for you? And listen, because I think you'll find some similarities and commonalities that you might not have seen otherwise. And then I think beyond that, we really can start to identify and leaders emerge. And other committees may be formed where we needed committees that we don't have already. Maybe there's new energy and new members that want to join committees like the Migrant Solidarity Working Group as a result of these kinds of conversations. And then I really think getting it done, trying to achieve policy goals, to win some policy goals, helps empower and make people feel like, oh, yeah, we're not just talking around this policy, we're getting things done. So trying to find policy things like this ungraded egg campaign in the Ontario example, where it seems like an achievable goal with a timeline that also seems achievable. Yes, we have other bigger policy demands that are going to be much harder to achieve, and we need to keep those on the table. But finding some of those small things that are actually we can make done and check them off as a success, and maybe share next year that we've achieved something, is really empowering and helps us push our policy forward. I think I'm going to stop there.
Thanks. So it just kind of maybe a little bit of pulling some threads together. Some of the things that have been successful in the past and that are continuing and that we can keep on doing and building on. People have mentioned the policy committees. We have several policy committees. It's real easy to join, and just email one of us. We're going to put our email addresses up on the screen at the end of this session. Also, in your convention kit, there's an evaluation survey, and one of the questions is about, if you're interested in joining a committee, you can circle the one you're interested in and leave your contact info, and that's another way to get involved. And with these committee meetings, we generally meet once a month by Zoom, and we have an agenda. The members of the committee put the agenda forward, and it's an opportunity to learn from one another and learn more about the issue, come up with some strategies, figure out, well, how are we going to tackle this? And then that can lead to actions that people can take on according to what you're interested in, what you want to challenge yourself with, what you're good at, what opportunities there are. And some of these kinds of things might be writing an op-ed from your point of view. You don't have to be, policy staff to write an op-ed. You have a perspective on this as a farmer, as a farm worker, as an ally in your experience, why this matters, and you can get it out there, and your voice can be part of this public discussion. And similarly, call-in shows are often an opportunity on the radio. If there's a topic that you're interested in, dial that number and be that voice, and that actually helps the journalists realize, oh, this is a topic. I guess there's people interested in it. Maybe we'll do some investigative reporting, or just raise awareness. So there's some additional benefits to that. Of course, meeting with your MPs and other politicians is something you can do, and this can be just organizing a meeting in your when your member of parliament is home on a break. Call them up and have a meeting with them, and don't forget to reach out to young farmers, as Julie had said, for building that experience. Maybe there's a bigger project like organizing a day of action on your issue, and that's a way to kind of coalesce a bunch of energy and create momentum about it. One of the ways that is really important for us as policy staff is when we're putting together a policy document, like a brief or a consultation report or a report. We want to hear from you. If you can read draft versions of it and reply with your comments and say, this doesn't really ring true for me in my experience, or like, oh, you forgot this whole area that really matters. That kind of input from members is really one of the strengths of NFU policy research. We are grounded in the experience of farmers, and that comes from you folks. And so don't be shy. Don't worry about like, oh, I'm not sure if my spelling is right or anything like that. We just want to hear the ideas. We want to hear that input, and that and argue with us too. And also one of the things that everybody here, I think, has mentioned is working in coalitions and working with other groups. The NFU is a member of quite a few different really important groups, like I mentioned CBAN, the North American Digital Ag Working Group. We're involved with the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives, research on trade agreements, the Via Campesina, obviously. So all of these ways of taking the NFU ideas and messages to a broader community, it's really valued by the other members of the coalition, because farmers are a minority in Canada, and NFU farmers are even a smaller minority, and having our perspective really informs them, and so much of the political work is done in urban spaces. People don't have an experience of agriculture or farming, and they want to know. So if we can be that, helping them understand how maybe their urban issue connects to rural life and farming, and we can make sure that our perspective gets into that larger discussion, and we'll feel less isolated. And I think it's really good for our overall politics to have a more effective farmer voice in all of these discussions. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Yes. Oh, I think this one's working. Here, I'll give you that told. Thank you. I really appreciated you sharing all of your ideas and perspectives of how people can get involved. And I was reminded while you were speaking that I don't have to do it all, and I hope others feel like that too. You as an individual do not have to do everything. I think or at least I felt and was reminded that I can do what I'm able to, what I'm interested in, what I want to learn about, maybe something I have knowledge in or am passionate about, and trust that the other people in this room and the people on Zoom will fill in the gaps of what I'm not able to get to. So I really appreciated all your thoughts. Thank you. We're going to open it up for a little sharing period and a question period. So there's 2 mics in the room. There's just 1 mic in the room. So if you have a question you would like to ask the panelists, you're welcome to. But I also wanted to broaden this moment a little bit, because I think it was Dave maybe said this in the panel, and I wrote it down because I thought it was really great. And it's we need to use policy as a mobilization tool. I think that's very powerful, and I think a way that we can get to that is by storytelling and sharing our stories with each other. So before lunch, I thought it would be really great if we wanted to use this space, if anyone has maybe a policy experience or campaign they're part of or a story that they want to share that they've been involved in. It doesn't have to be a success. It can just be whatever you want to share with the room. You're welcome to share that, and I'll ask, because we would want to get to lunch on time, if you just can keep it to 2 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. Sorry? Yes, if you're on Zoom, you're please participate in this conversation. You can put things in the chat, we'll read it out. Or I think we have the ability to put people on screen and you can unmute yourself and share that way. So yeah, if you have a story or experience you would like to share, please come up to the mic. I will maybe cut you off if you're rambling on a little too long. So try to keep it high level. We don't want to necessarily get in the weeds right now, but try to give like an elevator pitch. So as we move into lunch, if there's other people in the room that are like, oh, that person was talking about a really cool thing, I can go talk to them and get in the weeds or use lunch to get more into the details. That would be great. Did you want to start us off, or do you have a? Yeah.
Okay, Diane. Oh, there we go. Diane Dowling, Local 316, the Kingston area in Ontario. Very briefly, I was and I guess I'm still involved with the Save Our Prison Farms campaign from 2010. And save your applause. I have good news. We sold the last of our calves and cattle back to Corrections Canada this fall, and they shipped the first milk out of the dairy barn there on October the 30th. And the national NFU was very, very supportive of our campaign and important to spreading the word across the country about a good work program that was in Canada's prisons and which was ended by the Harper government and then restored through the Liberal Party. So I'm just taking a moment here to update you that it's drawing to a very slow close. You know, what is it, 2024, and we bought the cattle in 2010 and fought the battle before that since 2009. So campaigns can work. And the support was amazing in the community. Everybody said it didn't make any sense to close the prison farm programs. And it was, you know, the leadership was powered by the supporters in the community. That was our fuel. Thank you.
Oh, what a win! Thanks so much. And if anyone has follow-up questions, for example, I have one. If whenever you make your way back to the mic, what your biggest learning experience was from this, I'd love to hear that. Or I can catch up with you at lunch because I think we have another question or story.
This is sort of like a question. I just wanted to say thank you to the panel that gave their experiences as they're working as part of the NFU. And I just want to know, what strategies have you guys considered in engaging the public at large? Like, I find that a lot of times we talk amongst ourselves, but we don't get out to the public. Now, we have opportunities through farmers markets, through so many different avenues. And yet I find that we're very silent in those spaces. And when we ask people, I'm at farmers markets in Toronto, and so when we ask people, do you know about this particular topic, they don't know. And so I think part of our strengthening is to get the message out, especially for things that will affect us as Canadians and as citizens of the world. So how can we do that? How can we engage that? And I'm willing to be part of that conversation as well, too.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you for the question. Does anyone want to respond? Cathy?
This on? Um,
Three. Which harder, Region 5?
just a
Oh,
sec.
sorry,
Butch.
we're just going to answer the
Okay.
previous
Oh,
question
sorry.
first.
Yeah. I'm just trying to tell if the microphone's on. Is it on? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that question. That's super important, and it's something we're always trying to do is to get more engagement from the public on on the issues that we do. One of the things that we have tried is distributing postcards that people who are direct market sellers, can put into their boxes and to hand out when they're doing deliveries. That's had mixed success. Of course, we're one of the main ways that we try to reach out to the public is with press releases and op-eds and things in the media. But we're finding that we're having more difficulty with that because of changes in the media space, and on social media. Again, we are not triggering the algorithms the way some of the more inflammatory actors do. So I think your point about how can we connect with the farmers market people is really, that's a really good audience, because they're connecting with the customers and with farmers. And maybe there's a way we could set up perhaps a dedicated email list or a way to reach the farmers market associations and say, hey, is this something that you would bring to your meetings? Would you ask your vendors if they would like to participate? So maybe we can keep in touch about this and see what kind of strategy might work for the farmers market people and for us, so that, and what kind of issues we might use very well in that kind of forum.
I just wanted to also say that we have a great audience in schools. There's a lot of young people who are looking for careers that may not go through the regular route, whether it's university or whatever it is that people are telling kids nowadays that they have to do as careers. So there's there's social networks, there's a whole lot of avenues to reaching people. I know what you're talking about, the the cards and things like that. It's been my experience that vendors really don't speak more about it, but maybe setting up a booth at the farmers markets where people can be engaged, and other public spaces where people can hear about issues. But I think definitely we got to get out there and get the message out there.
And that sounds like a really good way to involve members here who are farmers market vendors. It would be a great place for you to participate and take action and leadership. So thanks for that idea and that inspiration.
Thanks. And I think we're just going to, Dave, you wanted to respond to this?
Can I really quickly? So yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to remember is all of our spaces are politicized, whether we think they are or not, right? And so farmers markets are deeply political spaces. And we, I think, need to encourage all of our members, as I think we've talked about in this panel, to just to share their political thoughts on the struggles they have as small-scale producers in these spaces, and what is needed to protect farmland and to protect farmers as we move forward. And I would say, I think a lot of our members are already doing that, but I would like more of them to drop the NFU's name when they're talking about these things, and talk about how there is an organization, because I think sometimes we are really good at sharing our political views, but we need to connect them to a larger social movement, and that's the NFU, right? So taking the time to do that's really important. And I guess the other thing I just wanted to say is that we also are trying to do more and more within Region 3 collaborative writing projects, and that we then send out and get other community groups and eaters to sign on to. So when we're talking about farmland protection and our ability, we won the pushback against the Greenbelt, right? We did that through a collective writing statement that got published in the Toronto Star, Let Them Eat Concrete, that many of our members helped produce, right? And we also worked with organizations like Alliance for a Livable Ontario, Ontario Nature, David Suzuki Foundation. So we started to bridge and build relationships between us as a farmers organization and other important community and social groups. many of these are great ways for us to build these kinds of solidarity and connections with eaters and make the NFU more visible, because we are doing a lot of the work. It's just going unseen.
Thank you, Dave. So we'll take the next question at the mic, and then we'll go on to, we have I think something on
One
Zoom.
quick comment. There are so many good topics that you raised that we could really relate to. But in terms of farmland, Manitoba and Saskatchewan had a policy at one time where you could sell your land to the government and rent it back for lifetime lease. And I made a presentation at that time. I would not have qualified. That how good a thing that was. And I was called a communist. And I can't forget that. The other issue that you raise is what companies want, a monopoly now. That's kind of funny. We had a monopoly of the wheat board. They said that wasn't any good. And that's what these guys want now.
Thank you. Do any of our panelists want to respond to that? Okay. Yeah, it speaks for itself. Thank you. Is our Zoom person or a chat box? Okay.
You can go ahead with your question, John.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is John Atebi, the National Vice President Policy. I apologize for my absence, which is, of course, due to the obvious reasons. We just welcomed the baby. I wanted to take the time to appreciate all the policy staff. The report, of course, shows the fact that NFU is doing a lot of work. And, NFU has a lot of impact that transcends the agricultural space. One of the speakers has talked about how we could get involved. And one thing that stands out for me is the fact that NFU provides a platform for you to really get to know what is going on in Canada, what is going on in, of course, the agricultural sector, and how these things intersect with you as a farmer. It's very difficult for us to, take an interest in, for instance, issues of climate change. I especially know how it relates to what we do, except when you join a forum like NFU, where they sort of break it down for you and they kind of let you know how climate change affects what you do as a farmer, how issues of land grabbing could potentially affect your future whether as a young farmer or how it could impact your succession plan as a farmer who is of a particular age. And one thing I also wanted to stress is I had a recent experience thanks to Cathy. We sort of got involved in the recently concluded provincial elections. We reached out to all the political parties and we wanted to just get a sense of what plans they have for British Columbians as they were preparing for the elections. And that was an eye opener for me because, I got in touch with them using my capacity as the policy vice president. And a lot of them took weeks to get back to me. And that sort of got me asking questions like, could it be that these guys don't actually have any agricultural plans for the people? And that was it, actually. A lot of times, politicians just come out to say, we vote us in, we're either against these guys, they've been bad. But most of the times, they don't pay attention to critical issues that affect the agricultural sector, which is why you're not seeing issues like what was going to happen in Ontario before NFU and other spirited organizations kicked against, the expropriation of agricultural lands. And it's been going on like that. And it's a reflection of the fact that these guys have lost touch with agricultural issues. And if not for an organization like NFU, the government, the politicians are not going to be aware of all these things, how critical the agricultural sector has become in Canada, and the need for government to be more, more serious about their approaches to, of course, preserving the land and, boosting agricultural productivity in Canada. So, these are some of the things that NFU offers as an organization, and I really beseech everyone to continue to contribute your own quota to, of course, developing NFU. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear online, but everyone was applauding that. Did anyone want to comment on that? Okay, thanks. We do have maybe 5-ish minutes if anyone else had a question or a story experience that they wanted to share. If not, we can have lunch early. Maddie, yep.
Maddie, I don't know, local 305. I'm shouting out Ayla. Ayla Fenton just went to an agroecology encounter in Vermont on behalf of the union. It was really great. I'm sure she'll be willing to answer questions. And when she was down there, she heard from this wonderful farmer. She can also remember his name. I can't. Who I thought about this as Dave spoke about, like in response to the question and kind of proposal to think about how to activate farmers markets. He puts like little political facts in his egg cartons. So like he literally like the product itself has the education in it. And so you like just open it up and it's there. So an idea.
Very cool. Thanks.
2 minutes. Dr. John actually made me really think about, I was just at the Food Secure Canada conference, and I'm sure some of you were there, and the main thing that they were saying was that there is an election coming up, big time, probably in spring, and this is the first time in the country that food is the #1 political aspect that people are talking about around the kitchen table, and it's because of people like us, come on, like that are doing this work. Right? It's super important now for us to take the time to get involved with like Eat, Think, Vote and these things to really talk about food, because like Dr. John said, the MPs don't even talk to farmers anymore because we're not important. Guess what? They can eat concrete. Like, right, Dave? Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Just give me 1 second. Okay, we'll take the last from Sunshine.
Thank you. It's Sunshine, Local 362, and I really appreciate there are a couple of points people made about using policy as a way of mobilizing and also having younger or newer NFU members to go with some of the more experienced ones about policy advocacy. I personally have had a really good experience this past season to be part of the table of our local at the CD Saturday. I am a farmer's market vendor, but I also realized like I love that egg carton idea, but it's hard to have an in-depth conversation when you're just trying to move things. But at the CD Saturday, I was with Phil Mount, and we're at the same NFU table, and that was really good occasion for me to learn more about how to communicate a lot of these. And the said postcards were all there, and it was a really good crowd to be spreading that sort of message. So I thought that to share that and encourage more of these.
Thank you so much. Yeah, having things people can take away and learn more is great. Do we have time for one? Okay, 1 minute. Thanks.
Ian Robson, Region 5, on the board of directors of Farmers Union. So I want to point out that the NFU has done lots of studies about food and the cost of food and the differential between the farm gate price and the prices on the shelves. And when the NFU started, that was one of the big issues way back in the 60s and the 70s. And at that time, we had people who were aware and they were fighting for their rights, which is more and better wages. And it's the same issue today. We've got to change the channel. It's not the price of food, it's the price of your wages. And let's get this changed a little bit. Somebody respond. Thanks.
Thank you.
One of the things that we didn't talk about in terms of upcoming is we've gotten a small grant to support some work on the exact issue of food prices and the farmer's share. And we actually are framing it as that the cheap food policy that has been in place by governments for many years is actually the cause of expensive food. because of how it promotes the monopolization of the food system by, the input companies and the grain companies at the farmers' end, and also the retail grocery companies and the processors closer to the consumer. So we're going to be doing some work on that, and to really come up with some good talking points so that we can not just make this into farmers are taking too much. We need to have cheaper food. What we need is a more just food system, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about. And thank you, Celeste, for bringing up that Eat, Think, Vote. That's a really important tool, both for getting the message out and connecting with people in other spaces who are also concerned about politics and the election.
Thank you. Yes, we can applause. Okay, Diane's slowly creeping closer and closer to me, so I think I have to wrap it up. Thank you very much, panelists. Oh, it wasn't that funny, but okay. Thank you very much, panelists. I hope others in the room feel inspired to take action, get involved with more policy work, and maybe try dipping a toe or stepping into the cycle of political learning. So please, a round of applause for all of our panelists today. And I think we're going to get their emails up on the screen maybe, so you can connect with them later. Thank you.